Yeah, I guess I'm recording now. Yeah, it is recording. So, okay.
Awesome.
So, we are trying to learn prop logic, right? But like, before even before we even go into what prop logic is, we need to understand like sort of like the bigger picture, like where does logic fit in? What is logic, um, and all of that. So, roughly speaking, we are talking about philosophy. I hope you can see whatever I'm writing, right?
Yes,
Yes,
perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
perfectly. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're talking about philosophy, and there are like of course, there's no consensus on what the definition of philosophy is. But like roughly, like if I want to give you like a layman understanding, or like a very not so rigorous kind of like an understanding of what philosophy is, I would just like it's a proprietary sort of sense, but like I would just say it's sort of like the discipline where we ask questions and like we try to answer them, and we like think about questions and we think about how to think about questions, all of that stuff, right? So, roughly speaking, there are like five. Sometimes even this number is sort of like variable, but most accounts I've seen it there are like five major domains of philosophy. Uh, One is metaphysics. Uh, then we have epistemology. Uh, and we have ethics. We have aesthetics. And so the thing is, sometimes people club these two into value theory. Uh, but yeah, like whenever we talking about like veganism and stuff like that, we usually talking about like ethics. Um, so like yeah, we have those four, and then we have logic. Uh, so these are like sort of the main subdomains of philosophy.
Um, what are the other ones? Like what is the metaphysic physics? What is epistemology?
Yeah. So roughly speaking, metaphysics is again the study of reality, the study of the nature of reality and stuff like that. So I can give you like questions that sort of are talked about in metaphysics, like like what is time? Is time like an illusion? Like the theories of time, all that stuff comes into like metaphysics. Um, you can also
Like a free will and determinism falls under that as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. All of that stuff comes in metaphysics. And when you're talking about like epistemology, you're talking about like knowledge and beliefs and all of that. So you have like theories of justification. You have like epistemic contextualism. You have what's justification, what's knowledge. Yeah, yeah. You have like theories of knowledge, get your cases, all of that stuff. That's in epistemology. Um, so epistemology is like sort of the study of belief and knowledge and all of that stuff. Um, Ethics is like yeah the study of right and wrong behavior and all of that. There are like subdomains
Would
within.
you say that epistemology is like the root of science or something like that?
It's a bit more complicated. So these are like even though I'm separating like even though these domains are sort of separated, they like it's more useful to sort of uh look at everything as like sort of like an ocean, and philosophy is just like the water, right? And there are like sort of islands in it, and then like sort of like just imagine water level rising to the point that it covers all the islands, and each island is like a subdomain. um, so it's like there's a lot of overlap between these. So when we're talking about like science and stuff, it's usually like a combination of epistemology, logic. There's also some metaphysics. It really depends on what kind of question you're asking. Like, like of course, you you can have like epistemology, but if you don't have logic, which is the study of arguments and reasoning and all of that, um, then like there's no way to reason about justification and ethics and all of that stuff. So it's sort of like weird to say science is only about epistemology, but you could say, yeah, like majorly speaking, like science is like a culmination of epistemology, logic, maybe a bit of maybe a bit of metaphysics as well. um, all of that like sort of combines to give rise to like the scientific method. um, and then like you know there are like other questions that you can ask, um, which are like they're going to combine some metaphysics and logic. So if you're going to talk about like whether propositions exist or stuff like that, that's sort of like a combination of metaphysics and logic. um, if you're talking about like philosophy of religion or something like that, there's gonna be some overlap between metaphysics and epistemology, stuff like that. So, point is, there's a lot of overlap between these kinds of topics. So it's not fair to say that this is only about epistemology.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, what's aesthetics?
Oh, it's the study of like good and beautiful and ugly and all of that. So yeah, roughly about like art and what we find aesthetically pleasing or aesthetically displeasing. That's the kind of stuff.
All right, nice.
Yeah, and the thing is, because these are like sort of like in ethics we're talking about good or bad actions, and in aesthetics we're also talking about good or bad, but in like a different sense, in like an aesthetic sense, um, like you could say some action is good, but you could also say this ice cream like tastes good or something like that, or this picture looks good, or this song is good. um, so we're using good in sort of like a we're using the same word, but we are sort of using them in different contexts, which is why like these two are clubbed together and we call it value theory. um, but yeah, like these are usually like good and bad and all of that, beautiful, ugly, those kinds of things. Okay, so we're going to be talking about logic because that's kind of the focus of what we're going to be doing here. um, we're not going to be talking about the other stuff. We might reference it here and there a little bit, to as like to just give examples or whatever, but by and large it's going to be our main focus. So there's like roughly two categories. We have classical logic, and we have non-classical logics. But before we go there, let's sort of discuss what logic is, right? So I'll just I guess I'll move over here. Okay. um Shit, why does it not have the white colors? I don't know. Yeah, so logic, again I'll just reiterate, is sort of the study of you could say study of arguments. You could also say it's a study of reasoning, which is kind of saying the same thing. I'll tell you, because like whenever we are, presenting arguments or like trying to reason, we're kind of doing the same thing. Like presenting an argument is sort of like giving, like telling someone what your reasoning is, um, or like you're facilitating somebody reason in a particular manner. That's kind of what you're doing with argumentation. Um, so yeah, it doesn't make much of a difference to say that it's logic is a study of arguments or it's a study of reasoning or whatever. Um, okay, yeah. So we have logic and we have classical logic and we have non-classical logics. What does that mean? The major difference between these two things um, is the three laws. So there are three laws of classical logic. And let me know if you think I'm rushing or something at any point. Okay. But yeah, there are like three laws. There's the law of non-contradiction. I think this must be pretty familiar to a lot of, people who do debates online. Um, then there's the law of excluded middle. And there is the law of identity. This might also be familiar to people who do a lot of like veganism debates. We can get into what these are. But before that, I'll just say that classical logic is any system of logic, any formal system of logic that obeys these three laws. Like it accepts the law of non-contradiction, it accepts the law of excluded middle, and accepts the law of identity. And if you have a system of like a formal system of logic that rejects even a single one of these three laws, then that system is like a non-classical system of logic. So like you have like examples of non-classical logic, like paraconsistent logic. Paraconsistent logic is like is a system of logic that rejects the law of non-contradiction. You also have other systems of logic, like intuitionist logic, relevance logic, um, modal logic. All of these are like non-classical logics basically. So that's because they reject. You also have fuzzy logics. Fuzzy logic rejects the law of excluded middle. Yeah. So depending on which law, depending on whether it rejects a law of logic or not, of classical logic or not, we categorize them as non-classical logic. So let's get into what these are, like very briefly. Like I won't go into much detail so that I don't, scare you away. But like yeah, law of non-contradiction just says, like simply speaking, all contradictions are false. So I'll just call it P and not P are false. This is like
What is P?
This is like oh sorry, what?
What is P?
Oh, it's any proposition, and this is just a negation of that proposition. You know what? I'll just write contradiction. Okay. All contradictions are false. Or you know what? I'll skip on this. We'll get back to laws of logic later. Yeah. So we'll
Can
get
you
back to
can you
it later.
can you briefly go over them? Really, just curious about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, brief. So basically, law of non-contradiction just says that all contradictions are false. So yeah, there are no true contradictions. That's what law of non-contradiction says. So you could have somebody who's like a dialetheist, who believes that there exists like at least one contradiction which is not false. Um, so they will be like, they will be rejecting this law of non-contradiction, right? So they are called diletheists. So if somebody rejects the law of non-contradiction, they would be a diletheist. Um, the law of excluded middle just says that truth values are binary, so you can only have true or false. Um, there's no other like middle truth value. So a proposition can only be true, or a proposition can only be false. That's the law of excluded middle. Um, law of identity is basically x equal to x. So any object or anything basically is identical to itself, which means all propositions true of it are true of it. So that's sort of like the three laws of logic. Um, so yeah. So
Do you
now,
have,
yeah.
do you have a quick example
yeah.
for the law of identity?
Like what do you mean? Like this is just x
Like you're
equal to
saying.
x.
X equal to X.
Okay.
So like you
there's
can
nothing
just
else that
So like you
yeah,
can
yeah,
just
yeah. You could just
Okay,
say
like
you could just say
it can't be similar. Like you can't bring up something that is similar
no.
to X. It has-
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be like um you know, aputa is equal to aputa, or like um yeah, like discord is equal to discord. Like all the propositions
Like
true
all
of
the
discord
propositions true of
are
Discord.
true of discord.
Okay, and you can't bring up like WhatsApp or something equal similar to Discord or something like that.
You can, but that's not what law of identity is talking about. Law of identity just says that like if there is something, then it is identical to itself. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I gave you some examples of non-classical logic, like paraconsistent logic or relevance logic, whatever. But then the examples of classical logic is sort of what we are going to be studying, which is propositional logic. So propositional logic is a type of classical logic, which means it factors in all of these, like it obeys all three laws of logic, of classical logic at least. And like after propositional logic you also have like I shouldn't draw this arrow here. You have like categorical logic. Right, and you can sort of combine these two, and you get like first order logic. Some people also call it predicate logic. So you can also call it predicate logic, I guess, but I prefer to call it like first order logic. But yeah, so we're going to be focusing mainly on propositional logic. Yeah, so let's do that.
This is usually the starting, the entry point to classical logic is prop logic.
Yeah, generally everyone sort of gets into formal logic through propositional logic. It's like sort of the baseline, and everything is built on top of it. Like I can't teach you first order logic without teaching you propositional logic, because propositional logic is sort of like the foundation for first order logic, which just means that all the rules that are built into propositional logic are also built into first order logic. So you will need to be like you have to be familiar with the rules of propositional logic if you want to learn first order logic. Yeah, which is why we like and propositional logic is also like pretty easy, which is why we generally start teaching propositional logic whenever we are talking about first order formal logic. Yeah. Okay, so this concept, right? Propositional logic is made up of two words, propositional and logic. We've already discussed what logic is, like a study of arguments or whatever, but in this context, it's sort of referring to like a formal system. So it's like a formal system of logic which deals with propositions. That's why it's called propositional logic. Um, so it deals with, just give me a second.
Oh, you got out. Okay, sorry. Ah, no, no problem.
Wait, so
So I'll just yeah.
one plus one equals to two is a propositional statement, right? Okay. Even
Yeah.
though it's always true.
Modal logic. Which one is that again? Okay. So like possible, impossible in what modality? Then is it logical, physical? This is the logical modality. Okay. I got
Um,
Um,
what's an
yeah.
example of an exclamatory statement? Ah, okay.
Or like, oh my God.
Okay, makes sense.
It's up to you, man. I know it's late for you, but I'm down to learn some more. But it's entirely up to you. I leave it up to you.
Um,
Yes.
okay, cool. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So we're trying to give like a sort of a definition of what an argument is. I'll give you like a basic definition, right? Um, the most basic definition I can think of um, is a set of premise. It's a set of propositions. Okay. It's a set of propositions because remember we're doing propositional logic, so an argument has to be constructed out of propositions. So we are going to be dealing with only sets of propositions. So an argument is like a set of propositions um, such that at least one proposition is a premise and at least one is a conclusion. Wait, did I? Yeah. Yeah. So this is sort of like a semi rigorous definition of what an argument is. We will, as we gather more concepts, we will eventually modify this definition and make it a bit more rigorous, sort of to put like limitations on what can be an argument and what cannot be an argument, that kind of stuff. So right now, yeah, an argument is just a set of propositions such that among that set, at least one proposition is a premise, and at least among the elements of the set, at least one proposition is a premise, and at least one is a conclusion. So I can give you like a general form of an argument. Whenever we write arguments in like in a formal way, we usually write it like this. We write P1, and then let's say sky is blue. And then you have some conclusion, I guess. You can have more premises, but here I'm just gonna give like the bare minimum of what needs to be an argument. So you need at least one premise and at least one conclusion. So over here I'll just write it's a morning. Okay. So this is like the simplest kind of like form of an argument. Okay. So yeah. Yeah. You want to say something? Say something?
Yeah, I was like, that makes sense. Both of them are propositions too. They can be true or false.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So they're both propositions. It has to be a proposition because we have defined it as a set of propositions, right? So each of them has to be a proposition. But I can also give you this example. Let's say P1 is boo, and this is I am vegan. What do you think? Do you think this is an argument?
No.
No.
Yeah, because look, this is not a proposition. It's an exclamation. Um, so, like even when we're like thinking in daily, like daily reasoning or you call daily discussions and stuff like that, and we are uh, I think like one sort of like a pet peeve that Isaac and like Avi and all of the people over at the Ask Yourself Discord server they talk about a lot is when people have like debates where they're debating like non-propositions, like they will be like, oh, we are going to debate veganism today, like veganism is not a proposition. Like we're going to be debating climate change, like no, climate change is not a proposition. So yeah, that's sort of like a pet peeve of people who are sort of like literate with logic, like when you see people say, oh, we're going to be debating some non-proposition, but it's like really annoying to us. um
Yeah, I see another example even in your debates and debates of these people that the entire debate just becomes figuring out if it's even a proposition.
yeah, that's true. Sometimes, so I'm actually not even sure if that's a debate, because a debate in my like the way I understand debates is when like there is some
Like
proposition.
pre-debate.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even sure if it's a pre-debate, because saying it's a pre-debate, say, there's some um like you get the idea that this could lead to a debate, right? Like, but that's not even necessarily true. Like, depending on how the semantics cash out, there might not be a disagreement, so there won't be a debate. So it's sort of like um I would just say it's some kind of a discussion where we're just trying to figure out if there is a proposition or not. So, like a debate, in my view, is just going to be like like a subset of discussions where there is a proposition, which is like namely the debate proposition, um, which is disagreed upon by two interlocutors. 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 Um, and like yeah, the goal of the conversation is to figure out the truth value of that proposition. So that's the kind of like concept I have for debate. And like if
Yeah,
it,
to make sure I understand, so a debate is a subset of discussions where there's a proposition on the table, and the two interlocutors have like different attitudes. One thinks it's false, one thinks it's true.
yep. Oh, they don't have to have like opposite, like like one interlocutor could be agnostic about the proposition. That would also be a debate.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they just have differing attitudes. You're right about that. But it doesn't have to be like the extreme end. So you can have three kinds of doxastic attitudes. Like you can think a proposition is true. You can think a proposition is false, and you could be you could not be convinced that it is true and not be convinced that it is false. So you're agnostic basically. Um, so yeah, like if as long as the interlocutors don't have the same like doxastic attitude towards a given proposition, it's a debate. Yeah. Um, so yeah, like it's sort of like a like like it's a good exercise to think about all the things that we generally call debates, like in common parlance, and try to figure out what the debate proposition is, and like as a
And doxastic is that epistemology thing.
yeah, it's sort of like an epistemic term. Well, it's a philosophical term, but like yeah, it falls under like epistemology because we're talking about like attitudes and beliefs and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, like a doxastic state is just what do you think the truth value of this proposition is? Like if you think it is true, you have the doxastic state of truth. If you think it is false, you have the doxastic state of falsity. Um, and if you don't think it is true and don't think it is false, you are like agnostic or you have like an ambivalent um, doxastic state basically. So yeah, yeah, it's something to do with epistemology, but yeah. Here we are not talking about epistemology. Here we're simply talking about like the truth value of the proposition. Like doesn't matter what we think about it, uh, but yeah. So yeah, I think that should be like good enough for like the sort of like an introductory session. Um, have you guys done any like have you guys attempted to learn logic before, or is this like completely like blank slate?
It has
It
mostly
has mostly
for
for
me.
me.
Sorry, just I go. You go first, Meg. It's fine.
No, you go first, man. I muted myself. You go first.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I have tended to learn logic by myself, so it mostly has been like just refreshing some stuff, but I also learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, until this point, it's not gonna be very like novel if you've already attempted to learn it. Uh, yeah. Over the sorry, how do I refer to you? Um,
Is Eri? It's short for Heriberto. It's a
oh,
Spanish
okay.
Germanic name. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll call you Eri. Is that fine? Like, am I pronouncing that correctly?
that's fine. Yes, and you're a pura. Is that the way you do
Yeah,
it or no?
that's fine. Yeah.
What's the correct way?
I mean, it's close. Like, I guess it's just going to be like a very like sort of like a nitpick, but I guess it's fine. Like, it's a puta. It's yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's fine.
Meg, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say my experience in logic is pretty much non-existent. I never took any courses, but I've seen people in like Ask Yourself Discord
Yeah,
posting like
yeah.
PQ stuff. I didn't know what it meant though.
Yeah, yeah, you will get there. So the reason why I wanted to get that clear is because if you already have some experience, I'll take a different approach. But if you don't have any experience, I'll like take a different approach. Um,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, no experience for me. And
Okay.
also like there's a
Okay.
bot there I think there where you can take like a test where you can answer whether something is like logically consistent or not. right?
Oh, that. Oh, like on Ask Yourself, that I don't think that bot exists anymore. Like it probably committed suicide or something.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. There
Yeah,
used to be one.
there used to be one. There also used to be one on ARA. Um, but I think the person who made the bot sort of took it down or something like that, and so now the bot doesn't work.
Okay, that sucks.
Yeah, but hey, you don't need the bot once you get all these like concepts down. You don't need the bot at
Hell
all.
yeah.
You don't need. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll catch up. Like, okay. Are you guys only free on the weekends, or like what's your schedules look like?
My,
I'm free
my schedule
whenever.
is
Wait one
fairly
sec. I'll
flexible, but
actually turn off the recording because this is like sort of
but
not.
yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the willingness to teach us for some philosophy and logic is awesome, man. Thank you so much. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
thank you,
very
man.
useful for our activism and stuff.
Yeah, that's no problem.